Sarah Walker is standing in front of a mirror, inspecting her body in underwear and somewhat worried about the body she sees in the mirror. She seems to have body image issues, worrying too much about her appearance. After examining herself, she leaves for work. Working as a waitress in Hollywood, she is unsatisfied with her work. Hollywood is a place for actors to soar into stardom, but she has yet to catch a lucky break and become an actress. She wears clothes that reveal her figure for the first time, surprising her coworkers and manager. This change in appearance is unique for her, apparently different from how she usually dresses. She then takes a train to go to an audition. She goes through her lines with a director as she performs the character. She needs help with her performance, missing lines and requiring micromanagement from a casting director. Sarah is not satisfied with her performance. Her lackluster performance pushes her to punish herself harshly by pulling out a large amount of hair from the top of her head. Back home, Sarah is looking for more acting auditions online. She has many options, but she finds an advert for auditions for a horror movie to fit her expectations and expertise. So she applies for a role on the silver screen, an underway work by Astru Studios. At night, she visits a few friends at a house party. Nobody expects her to be there, but everyone seems pleasantly surprised. Tracy, Sarah's roommate, also shares similar pleasantries with the party hosts. Introductions aside, Sarah is given an invite to another event, Performation. Sarah hesitates, not interested in such an event at first. As she thinks about her attendance at Performation, Aaron pops by from behind her and pushes her into agreeing to come. Aaron then confronts Sarah about her disappearance in their social scene, only to eventually mention that she stole one of Sarah's prospective roles in a commercial some time ago. Aaron is further insensitive to Sarah, bringing up how undesirable the role is, and constantly badgering on about how lucky she is for missing out. Ashley shows up to further throw salt in her wounds and starts invading her personal space, simultaneously pushing her into coming to Performation. Realizing that the interaction before her is uncomfortable for Sarah, Tracy takes the poor woman with her for some drinks. As the two leave, Aaron makes one last effort to taunt Sarah. Later, Sarah is stuck talking to Poe, a cinematography geek trying to flaunt his equipment and other personal projects. She tries to make him feel good about his work, but realizes he is just trying to get in between her legs. Sarah finally finds freedom from the horrible conversation she is stuck in when Aaron and Ashley fall down and immediately grab Poe's attention. Taking the disruption as an opportunity, Sarah leaves the party space. She enters an empty room to escape the stress of social interaction. Sarah leaves the party behind, not gaining anything from such an experience. She cares about her success as an actress, so an event where everyone is full of themselves does not help her achieve her dreams. However, on her way back, Danny catches up and pitches a script he is working on. Sarah ignores Danny, receiving a message from the Silver Screen production team for an audition. The other party members catch up to Sarah, who explains her new opportunity to enter the acting scene. They all congratulate her, while Aaron uses it to belittle Sarah again. Aaron expresses her joking attitude by laughing at herself. She dislikes Sarah and takes any opportunity to make her feel less important. Sarah is now in the middle of her audition. She struggles with her delivery and lines, constantly looking back at her lines. Eventually, even reading the lines in front of her makes no difference, as the audition pressure makes it hard for her to perform. Her situation worsens as she notices blood dripping on the paper in her hands. She first thinks it is her nose, but examining it reveals that the bleeding is coming from somewhere else. The bleeding continues, and Sarah realizes it is coming from her head. Pulling her hair out is a habit that will now end with her ruining her audition. As she continues to bleed, she enters more profoundly into a manic state, eventually waking up in bed and realizing that the audition was just a dream. The following day, Sarah is waiting in line for her audition, constantly going through her lines to ensure she does not repeat her mistakes from her dream. Sarah really believes that this audition is her opportunity for success in Hollywood. Eventually, a woman comes out of the audition room in tears. The following person to audition is Sarah, taken inside by a production staff member at Astru Studios. Sarah is alone in the audition room with two other people. A man sitting at the desk takes the lead as one of the casting directors for her audition. Sarah tries small talk to ease some of the tension in the room. This business-first man shows no interest in Sarah's attempt at dialogue with him, as he just wants to see a performance that can warrant her filling the role. Sarah then prepares to perform the scene, quickly turning around and looking at her lines one last time. She then faces the casting director again and initiates the scene. Sarah delivers the lines with emotion and emphasis, making sure not to miss any details from the script handed to her. The casting director has complimenting lines, and Sarah does not miss a beat as she seems to perform perfectly. The moment the scene ends, Sarah looks happy with her performance. Still, she senses that the casting director does not think she is worth considering. Unable to understand why, she even asks if there are any notes to consider for improving her performance. Despite her inquiries, the casting director leaves her with no response. Sarah takes her things with her to the bathroom, immediately melting down in one of the stalls. She throws an aggressive tantrum, bangs the bed with her handbag, and eventually rips through the script in her hand. Shouting profanities one last time, Sarah sits on the toilet and collects her breath. Sarah's obsessive habit of playing with her hair overcomes her again. This unhealthy obsession with pulling her hair out also reveals her desire to punish herself in self-disappointment. Seeing her hair urges her to indulge in this unhealthy habit. as she ends her fit by aggressively pulling out several strands of hair from her head. She then gets ready to leave the stall and opens the door to find that one of the casting directors has been listening in on her tantrum for quite some time now. Sarah is taken back to the audition room, where the second casting director confronts her about her tantrum in the bathroom. Sarah initially pleads ignorance, but the director pushes her to be open about her fit. When Sarah admits to pulling her hair out, the casting director finds her even more interesting, demanding to see such a form of punishment for herself. Sarah hesitates initially, but decides to take this opportunity to get the role she has been working hard for. She awkwardly reaches for her hair, starting with one hand, until she eventually commits to this moment of embarrassment. The casting director hears a small rip from Sarah's head, now grabbing her attention again. As Sarah works through her hair, she collapses and starts struggling on the floor. Her tantrum eventually resembles an exorcism, with Sarah on the ground and screaming her lungs out. Finally, she stops, gets up from the ground, and stares at the casting director with a blank face. Seemingly unimpressed, Sarah leaves, with no idea why the directors called her back if they would not give her the role. Back home, Tracy sees Sarah and asks her about the audition. Hearing that Sarah is unhappy with how she performed, Tracy tries to cheer her up by inviting her to hang out with friends. Sarah dismisses the offer and decides to sit alone in her own room. Sarah's room has several pictures of silver screen actresses as she stares at them. Her inspiration is on the wall before her, and she is clearly shaken up by her last audition performance. The next day, she is at her job at a restaurant. This time, it is more evident that her place of work has a business model depending on the objectification of women. She sings the birthday song to 2 grown adults, alongside 3 other women who wear a similar tight outfit. She gets a call on her cell phone, immediately distracting her from her work as she leaves the restaurant through the back door for her to call back the casting director. Her manager tries to stop her, but Sarah cares far too much about her career as an actress to lose out on this role over a missed phone call. Sarah is given another chance at auditioning and is called back for another meeting. Sarah agrees, happy to get another opportunity to prove herself. The manager at her restaurant finally makes his way to Sarah, furious that she is receiving calls outside of her break time. The manager has a discussion with Sarah about her future at the establishment. He asks that Sarah focus on giving her full attention to the job, demanding that she remains focused during her shift. However, Sarah takes his discussion from another perspective, realizing that she should give this new movie her undivided attention, with a real opportunity presenting itself to her. She quits her job on the spot. The next day, she goes for her second audition. This time, she enters a dark room. Unable to see anything, she stands in the middle of the room when a spotlight shines, and a camera reveals itself to film her. Suddenly, the casting directors ask that Sarah disrobe. She hesitates, but her commitment to getting the role eventually takes over any moral thought process, as she removes all her clothes. When removing her underwear, Sarah hesitates slightly. The opportunity outshines her shame, as she now stands completely when suddenly all the lights in the room shut off. In complete darkness, the spotlight from before starts to flicker. The directors ask her to relax, and eventually let go. Hearing these comments, Sarah starts feeling uncomfortable in this situation of uncertainty, until she eventually starts relishing herself in the flickering lights. The casting directors add additional instructions, just asking her to let go. However, towards the end of the flickering sequence, Sarah seems to transform into a sharp-toothed humanoid. Eventually, the spotlight stops flickering and stays on. Sarah is now back to normal, with one of the casting directors coming over to her to congratulate her. Sarah is still slightly out of it from before, but she seems to be calm. She leaves the building smiling, seeming more loose and happy with her current circumstances. Back at Sarah's apartment, her friends are outside by the swimming pool. They are enjoying the pool when Sarah walks towards them. She shares her experience with the directors, clearly in a cheery mood with her bright future. Aaron remains a negative Nancy, while Danny is supportive, even asking her to help him find a gig with the studio she will work with. However, the role is not finalized, so Sarah eases herself and walks toward her apartment. Outside, she meets Tracy, who asks about the meeting with Astru Studios. Happy with her day so far, Tracy is happy for her roommate, until suddenly Ashley trips and starts bleeding profusely through her nose. Tracy looks on in horror, but Sarah watches the accident with a smile, even making Tracy uncomfortable. Tracy wakes up at night to a nightmare about her audition. She stays awake until daybreak, standing outside and watching the gray morning skies. Her phone rings, with Astru Studios on the other end as she stands outside. She picks up to hear that she has won the opportunity to meet with the film's producer. Now about to possibly lead in a movie, Sarah has to attend a dinner with the producer at night. She gets ready while her friends sit outside the living room and watch some audition tapes. Sarah sees her friends before leaving, and Aaron brings her down as usual. At the same time, Tracy is supportive and boosts her friends' confidence. With Tracy's encouragement, Sarah leaves the apartment. Sarah reaches the studio, with the casting director serving as her usher. Sarah is taken into the producer's room, where he stands waiting for the aspiring actress. The two start by talking about the movie, but the producer slowly seems to take a turn toward a more serious matter. His concerns align with more real-world problems as he keeps describing his film. The producer eventually asks about Sarah's habit of pulling her hair out, which she can only describe as a habit. Eventually, the producer starts moving on to making the movie role even more enticing, adding to the prestige of being a lead actress for a big-name film. Sarah riles up, due to the producer egging her on, so much that she loses consciousness of her surroundings and lets out her thoughts endlessly. When the producer acknowledges her as someone willing to do whatever it takes, Sarah takes it very well, feeling appreciation for her work for the first time. However, the producer has ill intentions, insinuating that the aspiring actress must be willing to do anything for a big break. He reaches for between Sarah's legs, clearly making her uncomfortable. Sarah can no longer take it, getting up and refusing to follow through. The casting director then lets her leave, while the producer looks at Sarah's exit with disappointment. Sarah reaches home, clearly shaken up by the traumatic event. Her friends ask her about the meeting, with Aaron makes a demeaning comment about her as usual. This time, Sarah cannot take it, going into her room promptly instead of dealing with any social interaction. Tracy follows after her, being the person closest to Sarah. Sarah is crying in her bed under the covers. Tracy lies beside her, checking up on her roommate. Sarah discusses everything that unfolded, eventually leading Tracy to react in disgust at how Astru Studios treated her. However, Sarah regrets not committing to her chance at fame. She cares more about losing her chance at a gateway role than about the traumatic event she experienced with the producer. Tracy looks at her roommate in disbelief, eventually changing the subject and suggesting that Sarah take the opportunity to act in Danny's upcoming movie. The regret in Sarah's eyes does not fade away, but she decides to give up on the role that she worked so hard for. The next day, Sarah is sitting with her old restaurant manager. She asks him to forgive her for her outburst, but has to go through a lecture about the manager's personal beliefs about how she should spend her life. She listens to it all, responding without emotion, and eventually agreeing to work at the restaurant again. During her break, Sarah is balled up by the back door in frustration. Later, all the friends are together and hanging out. No one is doing anything of substance, mostly just talking, loitering, singing, and dancing. Sarah does not like the scene before her, so she moves away from the group and sits on a couch by a van. Danny walks over to grab a cigarette from his van and checks up on Sarah. They talk about Sarah's experience with the producer, eventually moving on to more pressing matters about their lives. Danny comforts Sarah and mentions that they all need to work on making something for themselves, regardless of what they might have to do to stay afloat. Eventually, Sarah agrees to be in Danny's movie only if she takes over Aaron for the leading role. To celebrate, the two then take a pill. Having taken the pill, everyone dives into the pool. Sarah seems to lose herself as she swims. Eventually, she emerges from the water and sees Danny photographing everyone swimming inside. She thinks about her future now with these people, but has a change of heart when she sees Aaron lean in and kiss Danny. Realizing that even in such a situation, Aaron might be getting what she wants by offering herself up, Sarah should be willing to do the same with Astru Studios. A bigger opportunity is a more worthwhile chance for her to give herself up than what Aaron is doing for a role in Danny's film. Sarah goes back to her room and decides to take her chance and call Astru Studios again. They invite her back, so she leaves in a induced state for the producer's house. She wobbles into the subway until she reaches the producer's lavish mansion. At the producer's house, the casting director takes Sarah to the producer again. This time, Sarah is significantly more open with the producer, less shy and more desperate for her role. Eventually, Sarah hears a ringing sound and loses her footing, falling down on the floor. The producer stands up and checks up on her, while Sarah apologizes for not committing the night before. The producer asks her to give up everything for Astru Studios, further wanting her to prove it by performing fellatio on the man before her. As she does, the producer forces her on him with his hand, revealing a pentagram etched on his skin. Suddenly, people in black robes reveal themselves, as Sarah seems to become a part of a ritual. Sarah wakes up the next morning with no memory of what followed after her interaction with the producer. She gets up from her bed, but starts to feel pain in her stomach, forcing her into the fetal position. Sarah is now at work, insanely pale and sick. She is drooling, as the manager sees that she is incapable of working in her current state. Sarah does not let the manager send her home, now forcefully trying to stay and keep waitressing. However, the manager eventually tries to take a tray of food from Sarah, but she fights back until the tray leaves both their hands. Sarah then slaps the man, prompting him to fire her. Later, Sarah calls Astru Studios again, asking if they can explain what is happening to her. They do not respond, but they receive her message. At night, Sarah and her friends are hanging around and drinking at a skate park. They have fun playing around, while Sarah is insanely sick. Eventually, Poe starts taking pictures of Sarah, who responds by taking her shirt off for some odd reason. Finally, the rest of the group stops Poe, Tracy taking his camera away from him. Sarah, oddly enough, shoves Tracy away and just leaves the group in the surroundings. Sarah goes to Astru Studios at night. She waits at the door, but starts begging for someone to help her, or at least help with what she is dealing with. Sarah gets no response, so she walks away, only for a homeless man to try and check up on her. She implodes on the poor man, eventually realizing her mistake, apologizing, and leaving. Sarah is walking through the city while her condition is getting worse. Her nose looks frostbitten, and she is getting weaker. She lies down in bed, and seems to be experiencing some weird form of an exorcism with simultaneous euphoria. Eventually, Sarah feels sick and needs to puke. Puking in the toilet, Sarah spends 2 hours in the washroom in anguish. Tracy is waiting outside, while Sarah is struggling to stay conscious because of her pain. Her hair is also falling out, another cause for concern as her condition worsens. Sarah rushes outside and straight into the kitchen. She scoops through a yogurt cup with her bare fingers as Tracy tries to check up on her. Sarah ignores her concerned roommate, instead eventually turning on her in her anger. Sarah eventually badmouths every one of her friends, forsaking them all in the process. Having no money of her own, Sarah has been relying upon Tracy for the past 2 months. Knowing this, she stops her outburst and goes back to her room. However, Astru Studios have left some money for her in an envelope, which Sarah takes and throws at her roommate, regaining an argumentative edge over Tracy. Sarah goes back to her room and covers herself in her bed. The casting director then pulls the blanket off her, forcing a cloth in her mouth and putting her to sleep. Sarah wakes up in her bed, still sick and in poor condition. Before her, a spotlight reveals Sarah, but completely healthy and dressed up. The woman before her seems to be Astru's promise of what her future will look like. Sarah is still struggling with her skin, as she seems to be in pain while lying in bed. Her struggles end with her out cold in her bed, but she is eventually able to get up and leave her room. She walks gingerly through the corridors, her physical condition holding her back immensely. She walks over to the toilet, cowering over it as she gets ready to puke. Nothing comes out of her mouth, but she notices something wrong with one of her nails. She pulls at the nail, only for it to easily come off and drop into the toilet. Sarah then manages to reach the sink, where she sees her reflection for the first time after all her anguish. She sees her balding head as blood starts to drip out of her mouth. She inspects her underwear, now completely soiled in blood as well. She tries to sit down in the bathtub, trying to get a better look at her body. She examines her stomach and notices something moving. A bowel movement causes her to puke, but she does not vomit hurl. Instead, worms come out of her mouth. Frightened by the changes her body is going through, Sarah leaves the bathtub, but doubles down on the floor. She cannot stand on her own 2 feet, but she hears the phone ringing. She desperately tries to make her way over to the telephone, essentially crawling across the floor. With much effort, she finally reaches the phone and picks up the call. The producer starts talking to her, taunting her condition, offering no sympathy. The producer finds it hilarious that Sarah expects her dreams to come true without having to go through any pain. He gives her one final instruction for her rise to fame, to offer up a sacrifice and let go of her inhibitions. Sarah follows these instructions, making her way to Poe's house. She goes inside, finding Poe and Ashley inside. Then she walks over to Danny's van, where Aaron and Danny are talking after presumably making love. Aaron leaves the van for a bathroom break, offering to bring back refreshments for the two. Sarah hides from them, not revealing her presence yet. Aaron uses the toilet and inspects her face, not helping her case as a self-obsessive acting talent. She goes to the refrigerator afterward to grab refreshments, where Sarah finally reveals herself, startling Aaron. Sarah lets all her thoughts out, calling Aaron out for needing to sleep with a director to get a role. Aaron is horrified by Sarah's accusation, but Sarah does not care for Aaron's opinions anymore. The two start hurling insults at each other, Aaron taunting her for prostitution and Sarah accepting it as her way to stardom. Aaron eventually turns the light on, revealing Sarah's poor condition. Aaron is now concerned for Sarah's well-being, clearly in need of help. Unwilling to accept Aaron's sympathy, Sarah lashes out and cuts Aaron with a knife across her face. Aaron slowly backs into a corner and cowers down as blood pours from her face. Sarah is horrified, now walking away from Aaron, but voices in her head start justifying her actions. Sarah pulls out hair from her head, pulling out a large chunk alongside a significant amount of blood. Aaron tries to get up, but Sarah is in too deep. She decides to finish the job, taking the knife and stabbing Aaron multiple times. Poe wakes up, not noticing anything wrong in the kitchen, leaving Ashley in her room alone. Sarah goes into the bedroom and grabs a dumbbell. Ashley is asleep when Sarah gets on top of her, bracing her weapon to bash the sleeping victim senselessly. Ashley almost wakes up, but Sarah starts beating her head in, until nothing remains besides minced brains and blood. Poe enters through the door, having seen everything in its entirety. Poe tries to run away, but slips on Sarah's hair and falls flat on the ground. Sarah sits over him and starts stabbing him repeatedly. She keeps stabbing, as Poe is unable to put up any fight. Sarah notices that Aaron is trying to get away, so she finishes the job with Poe and goes to Aaron. Aaron is making her best effort to escape, but Sarah takes a sandwich bag and starts suffocating the injured woman. Aaron struggles for a while, until she eventually loses consciousness and finally passes away in Sarah's arms. Sarah takes a moment to catch her breath, as Aaron lies lifeless on her lap. Danny is waiting for Aaron in his car, still unaware of anything that is happening inside. He opens the door to reveal Sarah sitting outside on the couch. He asks about Aaron, but Sarah does not give any clear answers. Danny realizes that Sarah probably has a poor opinion of him, with him and Aaron sleeping together not helping his case. He changes the subject, offering his help to Sarah. She does not care for anything that Danny offers, but Danny persists and walks over to her. He notices her physical condition, but it is too late, as Sarah stabs him in the chest. Danny falls on the couch beside her, where she forsakes all her friends and starts stabbing the amateur director repeatedly with a knife. Danny begs her to stop, but Sarah has lost any sense of concern for others, willing to give up her humanity for stardom. With no one left alive at the house, Sarah finally rests on the couch. Black-robed people approach her from the driveway, ready to take her away. A gathering of many people in formal clothing proceed towards a hill. They all form a circle around Sarah inside a plastic pod. Everyone there is part of a cult, worshippers of an entity called Astruz. They place lit lanterns to form a pentagram on the ground, while Sarah is in her plastic pod, clawing her way out and being reborn. The following day, Sarah is completely naked and covered in mud. She is no longer in the same physical condition as she was before. Her rebirth is complete, her hair is gone, and the cult leaves her a present for her resurrection. Sarah accepts the gift and leaves the ritual site. Tracy gets home and notices footprints on the wood floor. Suspecting Sarah might be home, she looks around the house for her roommate. She enters Sarah's room, now filled with lit candles, and Sarah is in her bed, hiding under the covers. She apologizes to Sarah for talking about the producer with the rest of the group, but gets no response. She uncovers Sarah, revealing her lying flat, like a full-scale doll. The door closes on its own, startling Tracy, who is now in fear of the woman lying next to her. Frightened, Tracy agrees to lie down next to Sarah. As they are together in bed, Sarah says goodbye to her roommate before leaning in for a kiss. The kiss hurts Tracy, who is struggling as she cannot escape Sarah's lips. Blood pours out from Tracy's lips as her cries of struggle become louder and louder. Eventually, Sarah pulls away, leaving Tracy's lifeless body on the bed. Sarah then opens the contents of her present. She gets a dress, a wig, and a necklace. She wears the contents of the box as she slowly starts to resemble the silver screen actresses that she has admired her entire life. Sarah finally pulls out a necklace. The necklace holds the symbol of Astruz. She is now part of the cult, having everything and everyone from her life for her rebirth into stardom.